G'day, coaches. When you were a kid, did you ever dream about being an athlete, about making it to the big leagues? I used to stand in my garage and I used to stand there in my little rugby boots and I used to pretend that I was there just like I saw on TV, right? Like I used to see these guys in the tunnel. I used to stomp my feet to make the sound, of the clack, clack, clack of the studs hitting the concrete. And I used to imagine it. I dream what it would be like to run out on the field. I dream what it would be like to sing the national anthem. And I think it's a little different when we get into coaching, right? We have these dreams as kids, but often we fall into coaching. And I guess that's one of my questions is, what's your origin story? How did you end up coaching? For me, I left university, really dropped out of university, let's be honest. Wasn't really having fun trying to be an accountant or a lawyer, and had this opportunity to be a development officer. I got the job, and for the next year, I was in an apprenticeship that South Australian government ran, and then from there, I continued to develop my coaching, both with the talent identification programs of South Australian Youth Rugby, U14s, 12s, 16s, 18s, and I was also going into primary and high schools, right? So elementary, middle, and high schools. And that was my origin story. And during that time, I started to see the ceiling of myself as a player. And it was at that time that I started to dream what it would be like. Super Rugby was massive at the time. This was the early 2000s, and Super Rugby was the bee's knees. It was the best provincial competition in the world. And all I could see was myself sitting in one of those, actually either in one of those coaching boxes or on the sideline running out the water, right? Because I didn't see myself necessarily as a head coach immediately. I was dreaming of myself as a skills coach, a forwards coach, a set piece coach, as it became later known. But that was what I was dreaming about. And as I went along on those dreams, I started to get this energy from them. I started to want to learn how to communicate differently. I started to want to connect with different people. And I think I was really fortunate that I was put in this situation where I was already coaching when I was a player. I was already starting to think about all those things, and I got to dream about what I wanted to be as a coach and what did training look like. And then I got the opportunity to coach the U16s very heavily for 3 years, and that was a real opportunity. I held different roles. First of all, I was a skills specialist, then I moved up to an assistant coach, and then I was eventually head coach. And at a very young age, I was afforded these opportunities to experiment and implement the things that I was dreaming about. Now, if you watched any other videos or you watched any of my reels, you know I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but this was not one of them. Me dreaming about who I wanted to be as a coach, that actually continued to inspire me. And then when I was talking at a certain period of time, the sort of high performance pathway coach development manager said to me, hey, you've got to go overseas. You've got to get some experience in a different environment. You can't just do all of this in Australia. And at the time I wondered why. Why did I have to do this? Why did I have to go overseas? And then I moved to America with my then fiance and now wife. And as soon as I started coaching overseas, I realized you couldn't make assumptions about what you were saying. And all of a sudden the dream started to change. Right? And I started dreaming a different way. Did I actually want to go to a World Cup on a US coaching staff? Did I want to sing the Star Spangled Banner before they played that game? And the answer was yes, right? The answer was yes. I got really excited about that. I was able to work in the women's pathway. I was able to do these different things. And those dreams changing in how we want to do actually starts to drive our curiosity as coaches. And that drive for curiosity helps us to go out and find information, and it's information that fits into a certain picture of how we would like to see ourselves in the future. And that's the real key to dreaming for me. We dream because it helps us get curious. And when we get curious, we go looking for the answers. And when we go looking for the answers, our growth is guaranteed. See, here's the thing. We start the process of looking for the answers. The answer that we find might set us on a completely different path. And that has happened to me so many times. But it always starts with a little bit of dreaming about who I want to be in the future, then a little bit of reflecting, about where is the gap, and then a lot of digging, watching, talking, interacting with different people, whether that's other coaches, whether it's players, whether it's now stuff online. It sends me down different rabbit holes. And those rabbit holes, those are exciting because once you start going down a rabbit hole, I start to dream about how does this affect the environment that I'm a part of? How does this work in to the environment that I'm looking to create? How does this help my players progress? What things do I keep the same? And what things do I start to tweak, refine, evolve, modify, chuck out? Right? Because you've got to do all of those things after you get curious. You see, here's the thing. When we were players, we often used to look up to a player. And because I had these models, I actually was able to sort of not necessarily model my game, but I would be curious to be able to do what they were able to do. And I think the same thing applies to coaching. It's really funny, as I was thinking about making this video, I actually thought about my own childhood, and I went back to the late 80s, early 90s, and Graham Lowe, who was a Kiwi coach, who was coach of the Manly Sea Eagles. That was the club team that I supported. I really loved Graham Lowe when he was coaching that. I also really hated Graham Lowe because he coached the Queensland Maroons in State of Origin and was very successful against the New South Wales Blues. This was one of those things I first learned about the influence of a coach kind of through that lens as I was thinking about it. And I loved and hated the same person. And it's really interesting because those attributes are actually the attributes that I need. He was able to make strong teams. He was able to help teams have an identity. He was able to help teams play for things bigger than themselves. That's what Graham Lowe was. And I aspired to be like him. I wanted to have a coach like that. And I realized, looking back on it, I probably wanted to be that coach as well. Another coach that I really looked to sort of in my early years was Bob Dwyer. He had a lot of success, won the 91 World Cup. And as an Aussie living in New Zealand at the time, you know, any time the Aussies could truly get one up over New Zealand in rugby union was, well, had to be inspired by that. And then later on, it was Rob McQueen. And coming in 97, having the failures that he did, and then being able to craft something that went on to win the 99 World Cup. And those were some of the coaches that I would think about as I started to dream. I started to think about how did they do those things. I read their biographies and I looked at the things that they did and how they came to learn. How did they develop the skills that they had? And by doing all of this dreaming sometimes with an ideal in mind of where I wanted to go to. At other times, I was taking a step back into like just who I wanted to be. And mixing those two things together, that just created and generated this curiosity. And that curiosity led me to go find the answers. So if you're ever having a struggle with your coaching, if you're ever not really sure, just take a bit of time. Dream about it. Honestly. Go sit outside, grab a coffee, no technology, and just think about coaching. Think about what you want to be as a coach. And just watch that turn into a dream later on. Look, we can't always become the coach that we dreamed of. But I guarantee you, if you get curious about that coach, you will go looking for answers and you will be a better coach tomorrow than you were today. If something here has landed for you, drop it in the comments. If you have a coaching sort of dream person that you aspire to be like, drop that in the comments. I'd love to know, right? Because I think these are the things that get me curious, right? I want to know what you're thinking about. I want to know where you're going for inspiration because that could inspire me in the future too. So it's a little bit selfish, but help me out. And if you want to talk about your coaching and you want to talk about where you want to go with your coaching, please go to freecallwithjosh.com. Let's have a chat about who you are and what you want to be, and let's start to map out that plan. So I guess I'll leave you with this. Hey, dream big. Think about who you want to be as a coach. Don't dream small. Dream really big. And then go out and do the work to find the gap between where you are and where you want to be and get curious about it. Because if you do that, you're going to continuously grow as a coach. And that's the goal for all of us. I'll catch you next time.